This haunted Kirkyard in Alloway, the very place where in Burns's imagination he figured witches and Satan performing their hellish jig, was a place he knew well in real life. His own father was buried here.
So remember, Tam has come scootling down here on his horse. So what I want you to do is, as soon as I clap my hands, I want you to scream as loud as possible. And when I clap my hands, I want you to run as fast as you possibly can. But not too fast, because Nanny has got to get your tail.
For Nanny, far before the rest, hard upon noble Maggie pressed, and flew at Tam with furious ettle, but little wist she Maggie's mettle. A spring brought off her master hale, but left behind her ain grey tail. The carlin caught her by the rump, and left poor Maggie scarce a stump.
How many witches and ghouls do you think you could get on this bridge?
I would say 1,500.
Exactly 1,500.
3,000.
That's a lot. When Tam O'Shanter's old mare Meg disappeared over the brig here at Alloway, she arrived in literary legend. Even at the time, Robert Burns understood that out of the wonderful fog of his own creativity, out of all the supernatural past of his childhood, in fact, out of the culture of a whole country, he'd produced his masterpiece. Burns is said to have written the whole of Tam O'Shanter at Ellisland in just one day by the banks of the River Nith. But if the scenery was inspiring to him as a poet, the stony soil did nothing but crush his hopes for success as a farmer.
Dear brother, my nerves are in a cursed state. I feel that horrid hypochondria pervading every atom of both body and soul. This farm has undone my enjoyment of myself. It is a ruinous affair on all hands.
Burns was anxious to escape the dreadful toil and insecurity of farm work. And when a new position came up in the excise in Dumfries, the Heaventop ploughman severed his ties with the land. Robert Burns was now 100% a civil servant in a prosperous regional town, with status, a permanent salary, a new house, and even prospects of promotion, if he could keep his nose clean. Burns became a founding member of Dumfries's new theatre. But one evening in late 1792, something happened here that would threaten his position. He was a government officer, but he didn't always behave like one. Now, was it a rowdy place, this theatre, during those years? Or would it have been a place where the free expressors of Dumfries would have come with a drink in them?
There is every chance that would be the case. It was very much a social centre. Now it seats something like 200. Then it could seat or stand 600.
Oh, really?
And during that time, remembering the French Revolution was on, Dumfries was completely split politically between radicals like Robert Burns and others of a very right-wing nature called the Loyal Natives. And they wanted to keep the radicals sort of in their place.
One evening, the rowdy atmosphere got the better of the radicals in the pit.
Yes, that night he was down there as God Save the King was being played or was being introduced. Lo and behold, some of the folks in the pit decided that they wanted something else. They wanted Ça Ira, which was a song, and the song of the French revolutionaries. What did it say? It said that les aristocrates ought to be burned or hanged or whatever. And this was quite a statement.
And did Burns participate in the singing of the song?
This is the question. He may well have mouthed something, but he stated that he did not participate at all. He stated, however, that yes, this was happening and a small group of people round about him were causing this trouble.
So maybe he was mouthing, "It wasn't me."
He could easily have been mouthing that. You never know. But definitely he was a radical, definitely. We know where his sentiments would have been.
Oh, wert thou in the cold blast?
Someone in the Theatre Royal that night reported Burns, and he was soon exposed to the cold blast of official scrutiny.
I have been surprised, confounded, and distracted by Mr. Mitchell, the collector, telling me that he has received an order from your board to inquire into my political conduct, and blaming me as a person disaffected to government.
Now, do you think this was a contradiction that Burns had to carry through that time? That he, as you say, was a radical, he was certainly a Democrat, a free thinker, and yet his position in the excise as a government official denied the possibility of him giving too free an expression to that side of himself?
That sums the whole thing up. Yes, he had to be very, very careful. Most of the time he was, but sometimes after a wee bit whiskey or whatever, especially in the Globe Inn, he would possibly make statements that he ought not to have made.
It took 3 months for Burns to learn that he was to be cleared and keep his job. But no matter how hard he tried, Burns couldn't always hold back his well-known political opinions. This was a time when Britain and France were at war, so political temperatures were running high, and so were political fears. Burns's misbehaviour in Dumfries was a real threat to him, to his well-being and to the well-being of his children. He understood that. Hi there. I'd love a Macallan tent. He lived in fear of being dismissed from the excise, a job that he'd sought with such energy, and he'd really compromised himself to get that job. And yet he would go out some evenings and just let rip. One night, at a drinking party, Burns raised a toast in company. "May our success in the present war be equal to the justice of our cause." One of the other drinkers took offence, and the incident threatened to escalate out of control.
Like anything in this?
Some ice would be great, thanks.
Had I had nobody's welfare to care for but my own, we should have come, according to the manners of the world, to murdering one another about the business.
I bet it is.
The words were such that I believe normally end in a brace of pistols.
The next morning, Burns was terrified that news would get out and he'd lose his livelihood. So he was forced to write a letter imploring those at the drinking party to hush up his behaviour.
You know that the report of certain political opinions being mine has already once before brought me to the brink of destruction. I dread lest last night's business be misrepresented in the same way. You, I beg, will take care to prevent it.
Some people took against this contradiction, this hypocrisy in Burns, in a big way. Because here, after all, was the guy who had really put his finger on Scots hypocrisy in the church and in the state in a way that nobody else had. He'd built his entire reputation on being an enemy of hypocrisy. He'd satirised the double dealers in the society of his day. But was he himself a double dealer? Was Burns himself a hypocrite? I think to some extent he knew that it was unsustainable, that he'd lost sight of the person he used to be. And that's the Burns that I feel is most pitiable. The one who wanted freedom but couldn't afford it. Burns' loyalty to king and country would be tested one more time. Fear of a French invasion was growing, and all over Britain, local militias were being set up.